Hi there. Not too long ago, I did a video about how museums have a major problem when it comes to funding and staff. In fact, I have spoken pretty regularly on this channel about the struggles of cultural heritage institutions, museum staff, and heritage sites. I've also spoken at length about their value and importance to community and society. Well, unfortunately, I am making this video today because the museum that I work at is closing, and I'm going to be unemployed by the end of April. You might be asking a few questions like, what will happen to the site? What will happen to the artifacts? What am I gonna do? And I'll try and break it down for you as best as I can. For context, I am the soon-to-be former assistant curator at Ellice House Museum and Gardens, and my job is/was to look after the collection of artifacts and the historic house. Ellice House is located in Victoria, Canada, and it is owned by the province of British Columbia. I really want to emphasize that it is owned by the province. They paid real money for it in 1975. Remember that for later. Over the years, the museum has been many different things. At one point, it was a tea house. At another point, it was a vintage shop. And when it was those things, the museum aspect of the heritage site was kind of an afterthought. But in 2019, the Vancouver Island Local History Society was formed with the intent to take over and transform Ellice House. They are a nonprofit society that took over management of Ellice House and have completely transformed it into a pretty respectable museum, if I do say so myself. They did away with the tea service that had been a staple of Ellice House for several years, but it had been on a pretty steady decline in quality, and allegedly the last society wasn't able to pay their staff by the end of it, so... The Vancouver Island Local History Society actually turned the tea house area into a functioning, rotating, temporary exhibit space where they rotated exhibits in and out on a semi-annual basis. In general, the society transformed the entire site and away from being more about retail and food service and more about actually being a museum that could share its story and its history and the history of Greater Victoria with the people who visited. I am/was employed by the Vancouver Island Local History Society. As a society, we transformed not only the house, but also the gardens. We actually fully redid the South Garden, which is also known as the Kitchen Garden, and we've transformed it into a mini urban farm. Last year, we donated about 500 pounds of fresh produce to a women's transitional house as well as a community fridge. Because the previous focus of previous societies had been more about serving tea and selling weird vintage, the artifact collection had kind of just been left to rot. Over the last 3.5 years that I've worked there, I've done everything I can on a part-time wage to try and undo the damage that was done to the collection. And I'm proud of the work that I've done. There's still so much that needs to be done, but I am leaving the collection a lot better than how I found it, if nothing else. We engaged with school groups and we gave workshops and talks about composting and sustainable gardening. I gave tours about items in the collection, and we worked hard to develop and support heritage work that is/was inclusive, diversive, and representative of communities in both the past and present. We took over the site in 2019, and I don't know if you've heard of this historical event, but in 2020 there was a world-shaking pandemic. Everybody was closing their doors, and we were no exception to that. At the time, we were absolutely heartbroken. We had just kind of started to get the momentum where we were transforming this place into some semblance of a functioning, respectable heritage site, and we were stopped dead in our tracks. We had zero income, but we persisted. We survived off of federal grants and the scraps that the province of British Columbia threw at us, and we somehow came out of it okay. In 2022, that was when we really started to pick up momentum again, really kind of dug our heels in, and we were holding events sometimes that had hundreds of people attend. People who had lived their whole lives in this city were discovering Point Ellice House and the stories it had to tell for the first time. We ended 2022 with so much excitement and hope, and we immediately started planning for 2023. How could we make events bigger? How could we do more tours? We should do different tours. We had so many ideas and plans, and 2023 has arrived. We are very dependent on funding from the province of British Columbia. We generally find out what our funding is going to be by the end of March, because the new fiscal year starts April 1st. January and February have been very anxious, miserable months, just waiting to hear some detail, some scrap, some rumor of what our funding might actually be. We know now what it was. The federal grant money that had allowed us to coast through the after effects of the pandemic is done. There's no more of that. We were asking ourselves repeatedly and agonizing and speculating, would the province of British Columbia actually give Point Ellice House enough money to pay all of its staff to be full-time and pay them a living wage? Or would it continue to throw us the scraps that it has for the last couple of years? We told the province, hey province, we need about $200,000 to $300,000 a year to be able to pay our staff and run this site appropriately. We need to be able to pay our hydro and water bills. We need to be able to pay for floods, because we recently had a flood. We need to continue to pay for the deferred maintenance from the last 30 years, because there's still things that are breaking and new issues that are arising. So we said, hey province, this is how much money we want. The $80,000 a year that you've been giving us, it isn't enough. The province replied, I can do $110,000. So about $30,000 then the scraps that we were getting. I'm throwing around some numbers that, if you are just one person, sound probably like a lot of money. But to a business, to a heritage site, $110,000 is nothing. And I'll break it down for you right now so you have a rough idea of just how insane it is that they expect us to run this site on so little money. Our executive director, the guy at the top, my boss, he's very open about his salary and what he makes. He makes about $60,000 a year. So 110 minus 60,000, you've only got 50,000 left. Our utilities are 20 to 25,000, so that gets our internet, our sewage, our water, our electricity, about 20 to 25,000. So let's just say 25,000. So that leaves us $25,000. Okay, great. I work there, and I would like to get paid, and I'm only part-time, but if you wanted to pay me full-time, I'd like at least $50,000 a year if I was full-time. And then, there's also the event coordinator, and there's also our 2 gardeners, and I bet they probably want to get paid. So yeah, you can kind of see that it's not enough to actually be able to pay people. And, people like to I like to get paid for the work that I do. And I'm pretty sure my coworkers feel the same way. But we are located next to a garbage dump, and the province has dug their heels in at every opportunity to try and help us actually succeed. It's frustrating as hell, man. It's frustrating as hell. It's crushing. It's heartbreaking. The province has announced that they're going to find another operator to run Point Ellice House, another nonprofit society. The society that I work for is the third that they have tried to get to run this place. And I don't know what they expect another society to be able to do with this place on 110,000, optimistically, by the way. Like, the base, from our contract, the base funding was 80,000. So I don't know what the province of British Columbia expects people to be able to do with this site. And tourism is like the biggest industry in British Columbia. And we're able to contribute to that, but then they don't want to actually invest in it. They don't want to invest in the heritage sector. They don't want to invest in museums. Oh, they only want to invest in certain museums, and they can't even get that right. So going back to that breakdown a little bit, the expectation that one person can run this heritage site is ludicrous. It's insanity. It's not possible. You need a skilled gardener to be able to prune and care for historic roses. You need an assistant curator who knows what the fuck they're talking about, who's able to do proper collections care and preventative conservation. You need to pay somebody to put events together. You need to pay somebody to be able to help all of these people. You need to be able to pay people, government. We have several dozen volunteers who are all fantastic, and they help fill in the gaps of the funding. They are absolutely instrumental in the gardens. They've helped me out in collections. They help our events run smoothly. They act as docents on the weekends when we're open. But you cannot run a heritage site on just volunteers. To really kind of drive in everything I've said so far, I have asked two of my coworkers to come and just very briefly share their thoughts on everything that's happening and why we believe that our work is important. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Janine and Ireland.
Hi, my name is Janine. I'm a staff member at Point Ellice House, was a staff member at Point Ellice House, and my job was visitor experience and programming coordinator. And what that means is a lot of the visitor-facing stuff, including running the site on the weekends when we're open, including putting together programming, including planning events, coordinating our interpretive volunteers, and all that kind of stuff. I do want to stress that I'm a part-time employee because with our funding, that was all we were able to afford. And I really want to talk about the importance of the people that work at a place like this. So a lot of people are concerned about what will happen to the site and what's going to happen to the house and the collection and all that kind of stuff. And that's a fair question. That's not up for us to decide. Of course, the province owns the site, but really the people that work in places like this are the way that sites like this are shared with the public, the way that they are activated by the humans is the way that people who visit really get to engage with it in a meaningful way. And so if you were to wander into the site and go and walk around the house and there's no humans or anything or no human interaction, you would have quite a different experience than if you have a wonderful team of staff members to be able to run it and share it and bring pieces of it alive for the visitors. So that's why it's so important to have staff running sites like this. There's so much work to be done at a place like this. There's more than enough work. We just don't have the money to pay the people to do the work. And as you might know, living in a place like Victoria is expensive. The way that you visited the site and experienced it over the last couple of years is due to the people who've done the work to research, preserve, share, explain, caretake, garden, curate, make exhibits. All of that was done by real human beings, and that's what I want to share with you all.
Hi, I'm Ireland, and I am the collections assistant at Point Ellice House, or I probably should be talking in the past tense. So I was the collections assistant at Point Ellice House, and for a whole day and a half, I was the group tour coordinator, which I was very proud to take on that role of leading groups around the site and sharing our wonderful history with them. But alas, we are now closed and I no longer can do that. But my job as collections assistant, which I was in for the longest, was really to help out wherever I was needed. So I helped our assistant curator with the cleaning of the artifacts in the house, the cleaning of the house itself, displaying artifacts for future exhibits, helping out with our new exhibits. Essentially, you could call me a gopher. I just went wherever I was needed, and I was happy to do so. So what I want to talk to you all about today is the value of the site as a historic place. I'm a public history master's student, and a huge part of what I do in my MA is to learn about why public history is so valuable. And Point Ellice House is one of those places. It really shares the entire messy, wonderful, not wonderful history of Victoria, and that's why it's important and why it is such a shame that it is closing. This house is so valuable because of the historic interpretation that we've brought to it, and it wouldn't have been possible without the amazing people who work there. It's unfortunate that we, as the museum staff, won't be able to learn more about this history because there's so much more that we can do, but also that we won't be able to share this history.
So thank you to Janine and Ireland for coming on and sharing that with us. Now, you might be asking, Christia, what are you going to do next? And I don't know, to be frank. I was kind of hoping that I was going to be at Point Ellice House for probably at least a couple more years. Another year at the minimum is kind of my grand plan. I don't know what I'm going to do. This Canada in general and British Columbia obviously don't care about heritage or museums, and I don't really know how to change their minds. I'm going to continue fighting for what I think is right and for these places to survive. I will continue to be an advocate for that. So if you want to support me in this channel, feel free to check out my Ko-fi. I have 2 memberships, or if you just want to do a one-time donation, literally anything is really appreciated. Even a nice comment. It's a pretty tough time right now. It's a pretty tough time. If you are in British Columbia or Canada, or if you've been to Point Ellice House and you want this place to be saved, if you want us to run it, I would highly recommend emailing or writing a letter to Lana Popham, who is the Minister of Tourism. Let her know your thoughts. And I would just continue, if you're not from Victoria or British Columbia or Canada, support your local museums. Please. If you're watching this channel, I have a feeling that history and museums are your thing. So please just go out and support the little guys, because once these places disappear, like, they don't come back, right? Like, they don't come back. And a lot of the outcry that I've seen in response to Point Ellice House closing is, oh, but I wish that we could have gone. And it's like, then go. You should have gone when it was open then. You should have made those plans and stuck to them, because these places are disappearing. And if we don't support them, then they're gone. And that is the unfortunate reality of the situation. I'm going to be okay, as are my coworkers. We are all extremely heartbroken, but we are going to be okay. I do have some plans for the channel, but don't be surprised if you don't see me for a couple weeks. Or maybe I'll post something next week. I don't know. I have no idea what the future holds at this point, and I am trying to embrace it. Embrace the unknown, as they say. I really do hope that you have a wonderful day or evening, wherever you are, and I will see you next time.